Hello and welcome to the Daily Atheist Morning Show. Good morning, fellow burners. Welcome. It is the, 21st of December, 2020. Thank you for joining me. We have got Jason Folks from the Dragons in Genesis podcast. He'll be here joining us in just a few minutes. My regular co-host, Andy Hall from the Laughing in Disbelief blog, will be joining me in just a minute, and Nokasuchi from the Rage channel. We're going to have some fun. We're going to be talking about, was Jesus created by the Romans or not? Who knows? Was it created by the Romans to control the Jews? How'd that work? Did it work? Did that happen? I don't know. We'll find out in a bit. Merry Christmas, sort of.
Hello all, Chris Mallard here, atheist extraordinaire, host of the Daily Atheist Morning Show, and currently burning in hell. Oh, don't worry about me, I'm not dead. I'm just down here for the annual Christmas party. I mean, annual solstice awards party. The Dark One, or Lucy as he is affectionately known, is personally handing out the awards. Aaron Ra is getting the award for the most souls brought down by evolution for his African fossil hunt, and Matt Dillahunty has won the Golden Phallus Award for being a dick to the most Christians. Oh wait, it's the Golden Fallacy Award for the confusing the most Christians. Easy mistake to make. To top it off, Seth Andrews has lent his voice to the Gregorian chants this year. It's delightfully hellish. Gotta run. I hope you all had a happy Thanksgiving, if you're into that sort of thing, and I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. A happy holidays, happy solstice, and a happy new year. Stay safe, heathens. Party hard, fornicate, that sort of thing. But do it safely.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I hope you were safe. We'll start with Andy. Andy, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm happy to announce I'm going to be doing my first Nacho Christmas on Christmas Day. It's going to be nothing but nachos. Nothing but nachos here in the Hall household.
Like vegetarian nachos?
Oh, yeah. You know, the kids will be eating some kind of meat-related tacos. Okay. But myself, my girlfriend, meatless tacos for Christmas.
Tacos or nachos?
Yeah. Well, there might be some tacos, but I'm going for nachos myself.
No, nachos. Okay, nachos.
We'll see how it plays out. It might be like nachos for the main meal and maybe some noshing on some tacos.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Sounds like a plan. Hey, how about you, Nokasuchi? Hey, how was your weekend? Did you have a good weekend? Did you?
Oh, yeah. It was a great weekend. Lots of editing videos. That's what I'm doing right now. So I'm woke up this morning, finished an edit, and after the show, I'll be right back to it. So, yeah, good weekend.
Awesome sauce. Awesome. Me too. I did a lot of editing. Hey, Jason, how you doing, buddy? Did you have a good weekend?
I'm good. I've had a pretty good weekend.
Good.
Been busy.
Been a day or two since we've had you on the show.
Yeah. It hadn't been too long. I don't remember. I haven't finished my coffee yet, so my brain doesn't work.
Oh, yeah. Understood. And still installing Java.
Yeah. Still definitely got to reinstall that Java.
Understood. Well, before we get into it, because this is going to be a fun one. I don't mean to cut you off. Before we get into it, I want to say hello to everybody. Good morning to everybody in the damn nation, all you wonderful people. Thank you. I hope you had a wonderful and safe weekend. All the people on Facebook, Twitter. We don't stream to as many Facebook pages as we used to. But Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and we're not going to stream to Twitter. They're going to stop doing that. And why stream to Twitch? Because nobody watches over. I'm going to quit doing that. There's going to be, anyway. So good morning to everybody who's watching this show. We've got a fun one for you. I want to let these guys do some talking. They're going to edify you about Jesus and stuff. And they were also talking about some other fun stuff before the show. Interesting. I don't know if it's fun or not. But yeah, that's going to happen. So guys, good morning, everybody.
Good morning,
Jason.
Good morning.
So I am curious. I'm going to state my position right here and now and see if my position changes after our conversation.
Okay.
I am highly skeptical at the idea of the Romans inventing Jesus.
Okay.
Highly skeptical. And if I was going to put money on it, I would probably say no. If it was like I would say no right now. Now, of course, my opinion can easily change given the amount of evidence.
I'm with you. I've heard this. I haven't heard the evidence for it. But if I was a betting man, my money would be on like the Jews invented Jesus, like the Jews that believed in Jesus at the time. So
okay. Gotcha.
But I'm interested in this because I've wanted to hear the evidence for this for a while.
Now there are many permutations to this.
Yes.
because you talk about Roman influences or pagan influences. But I would say to operationally define this, if we were going to say that someone in Rome or in the Roman state had some myth and they brought it out of the myth closet and mixed it all together and suddenly you got Jesus, yeah, I'd probably say no out of that.
Right. And yeah, what I'm going to basically be talking about here today is the idea that Jesus and maybe even Christianity as a whole is a creation of the Roman government to pacify Messianic Jews. And that's essentially the premise of this particular theory. And it's not actually a new theory. It goes back a bit. A guy named Bruno Bauer in like 1875, 1880, somewhere around there, was the first one to propose this idea. And so that's what I'm talking about when I say the idea that the Romans invented Jesus. Not like Roman citizens who were just engaging in classic syncretism like everyone else.
Welcome, host.
Because there
you are
is
now in the host
definitely,
room and can
like,
manage your
Roman
callers from the
influence,
call-in studio web
you know,
interface.
but it's the idea that it's a deliberate effort, sort of propaganda. And that's basically the topic here.
So yes, we're basically arguing whether or discussing whether or not Jesus is a Roman conspiracy.
Right. And so, yeah, that's the topic. That to kind of narrow it down, because if you just say, "Oh well, did the Romans influence Christianity?" Well, yes, they did. You just look at the similarities between the story of Romulus and Jesus. There's definitely Roman influence. You can't live in the Roman world and not be influenced by the culture. But this is like, is it a deliberate effort? And that's a whole different question.
And I would say, like, historically, there would be merit for that, right? Because Judea would have been a volatile part of the Roman Empire. They did have these prophecies of a Messiah coming, and many people at the time believed that not like a Jesus figure was coming, but a Jewish leader, a Jewish king that would separate them from Rome and make them their own kingdom again. So I could see definitely the merits behind. There's definitely logic there to think, hey, this is something that could have happened. Yeah.
And this idea can be traced back many centuries before the Roman Empire, when Judea was owned by the Babylonians. So the Babylonian Empire comes in, it invades, they take over everything. And then about 50 years later, Cyrus the Great of Persia, he comes in, he opens up a can of whoop ass on Babylon, and he takes all these exiles and he sends them back to Judea to sort of start rebuilding. And he's like, yeah, look, y'all aren't slaves anymore. You're not controlled by the evil Babylonians. You're on my team now. And I'm going to build you a brand new temple. And they loved him so much that they decided that Cyrus was a Messiah. He was anointed by Yahweh himself to be the Jewish Messiah. There was never supposed to be one Messiah. It just means someone who is anointed, like an anointed king. And so someone who comes along and makes everything better and is chosen by God to do so is a Messiah. And this idea can be problematic if someone else owns your country, because then everyone is looking towards some local leader instead of your emperor, and that can be problematic. They saw it again when the Seleucid Empire ruled over Judah. This was descendants of the generals of Alexander the Great. So after he died and the empire was split up, one of his generals had control of their land, and a guy named Judas Maccabeus, actually it was his father, but he's the one who really came to the forefront. He comes up and he's leading this large rebellion, and some people were basically saying he was a Messiah. Yeah. And this started the whole Hasmonean revolt and all the rest. And so it's Messiahs can be troublesome, if you're occupying someone's land and they suddenly get a Messiah. You need to watch out for that. So you would actually have um, a sort of motive for the Romans to maybe utilize that against the population. Oh, well, we'll make a pro-Roman Messiah. And that's where this idea really comes from. If you read the Gospels, they are very pro-Roman and they are also very pacifistic. If someone strikes you, turn the other cheek. Well, used to, if someone struck you, well, you hit them back. It was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And now they're saying, no, just accept it. You'll get a reward in heaven later. Right now you need to be peaceful. It's also pro-Roman, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, pay your taxes, obey the earthly authorities. And people, when they read that in the New Testament, that's one of the things that doesn't quite match with the Old Testament. It's very, very different. And so people like Bruno Bauer and Joseph Atwill, they say, this can't be coincidence. The Romans must have been involved in this. And so
is the argument that the Romans created Jesus and then somehow it got out of control and took over the whole empire?
It kind of depends on which permutation of the argument you read. In some, they created it as a means of pacifying the Jews, at least the Messianic Jews who were causing the problems. Because there were a lot of Jews that were already pro-Roman and just worked well with the Roman government. And so you didn't really need to do anything with them. But you had a bunch that were causing problems on a daily basis. And so in some versions of the theory, you create this thing to pacify that group, but then it spreads, out of control all over the empire and eventually becomes the dominant religion to the point that, Constantine himself is a Christian and eventually Christians rule the empire. And then you have some versions that say it was always meant to be. And it came back. And so that there's actually one where it was supposed to be essentially a religion created by the Vespasians. Now I can't remember the names. The Flavians, Vespasian and Titus. But then Titus died, his brother Domitian took over, and it kind of derailed the whole thing. And so
these are Roman emperors that you're talking about.
Right. And these were around the time of the Jewish War.
Mm-hmm.
And they were these guys, and this is another thing that makes people think this. These guys were directly connected with the Jewish historian Josephus, who wrote Antiquities of the Jews and the Jewish Wars. And in there, he is actually pitching the idea that Titus is the Messiah. He's trying to set up this Roman emperor as a Jewish Messiah, the same way that they did back in Isaiah with Cyrus the Great. And so you look at that and it's like, wait, he worked for the Flavian dynasty and he's doing like, what's going on here? And that really throws some fuel on the fire for this hypothesis. And the one people are most familiar with would be Joseph Atwill. He popped up early 2000s or late 90s, somewhere around there. And he wrote this book called Caesar's Messiah. And Caesar's Messiah, I got to give the man credit. His marketing team, whoever he got to make his YouTube videos, they are top notch. Everyone should hire them to do everything. They are impressive. The History Channel should hire them because they have better production quality than the History Channel. And so very good marketing.
It strikes me that because the Roman emperors were considered to be divine, if I'm not mistaken, it would seem odd for Rome to elevate this Jewish character to be divine in a way that is superior to at least ultimately, metaphysically superior to the earthly, let's say Augustus or Vespasian or Valens. It strikes me as counterproductive for the Romans.
Yeah, and that would be a very good argument against it if it wasn't for something that Joseph Atwill said, and that is that the whole idea of this Jewish Messiah popping up around the year 30 and then claiming that he will return within about a generation. Before some of you have tasted death, I will come back. And so, which a generation normally meant about 40 years. And so you advance the calendar 40 years and it matches up with the arrival of Titus. And they then take that and say, the Gospels were written right after the Jewish War, set about a generation before Titus, to say, okay, look, here's your Messiah, and he's going to come back, and then here are all these things that link Jesus with Titus, and say, look, he was prophesied in this ancient document. Don't touch it. The ink is still wet. In this ancient document that says he will return right around this exact time. And look, he even has a prophecy about the destruction of the temple that just happened right before I wrote this. And that's part of this whole thing. You take these different pieces and you link them all together. And if you watch the videos for Caesar's Messiah, it is quite compelling. But there are problems.
I like problems.
Oh, yeah. And if you like problems, then you should read Caesar's Messiah because it has some. So one of the problems is that it's linking Titus with Jesus through the names of some different people he's connected to, like a person named Lazarus and a person named Mary, who were also related, and they're from Bethlehem, and they're like, oh, look, Josephus is making these connections. But it doesn't quite work out that way because that particular Lazarus is not related to the same Mary. It's a completely different Mary. And actually the Mary in, I think, the Gospel of John that Lazarus is supposed to be related to is not the mother of Jesus. It's a completely different Mary. And he's not from Bethlehem. They're from Bethany. They both start with a B, so close enough. And then we also have to remember that, Mary was the most common name for Jewish women at the time. I think it was something like 25% of all women in ancient Palestine were named Mary. So saying that someone is connected to a Mary just means that someone is in the area. That's it. I mean, everyone was named Mary at the time. And so once you start to actually take a look at the parallels, and the specific claims that Joseph Atwill makes in his book, Caesar's Messiah, when you start taking a closer look, you find that they don't actually exist, or his case claims that these connections are much stronger than they actually are.
Right.
Part of it relies on puns that only work in English. It's like, he's talking about this thing that also is supposed to mean something else, and here's a similarity in the words.
Yeah.
But when you look at it in the Greek, because the whole New Testament was written in Greek, those two words are completely different. And no one who read those two words would relate them at all. And so it's okay, he's not studying the Greek, he's studying the King James Bible. And so some of his connections are just, coincidence due to English translation and had nothing to do with the text.
How does the conspiracy explain Paul? Paul seems to be the hype man for Jesus and for Christianity.
It depends on which conspiracy you read. Some of them, Paul is just a fiction also invented by the Romans. Like with Joseph Atwill, according to him, the entire New Testament was written by Josephus. Now, if you go to another book, which is actually much better than Caesar's Messiah. It's a book named Creating Christ by James Valiance and C.W. Fahey, and that's Fahy. That is a much better presentation of this argument. It's better researched, better written, better argued, doesn't have nearly as many issues, doesn't rely on logical fallacies, and it's not self-contradictory. It's much, much better. And he explains it by saying that Paul was sort of like an earlier Josephus. He was like essentially a guy, a Jew who was working for the Romans to try to spread a pacifistic message. And then Josephus basically, or not Josephus, but other people came around later after the Jewish War and continued this same process, the same work. So it kind of depends on who you read. Each person has their own little take on it.
Right.
Well, I think that if there's truth to it, I think that it would probably fall somewhere in the middle. Maybe Judah was a problematic province for Rome at the time, and they did start this like propaganda to try to maybe pacify some of these problematic Jews, and that propaganda just kind of exploded on them. And if you look at early Christianity, you have several traditions of what Jesus was. So they could have probably planted that initial, whether it's a lie or, hey, this rabbi over here, that's your Messiah because he's preaching a very pro-Roman doctrine or whatever. And then after the guy's death, then it just escalates. And then you have Paul coming in, and Paul says, hey, Jesus wasn't just for Jews, Jesus was for everybody. So, and if you look at Islam and the way that Islam exploded, it's very similar. You have this very small sect that Muhammad was leading that just exploded all over Arabia over a very short amount of time. That's what these religions had the potential of doing. So I think that if there's truth in it, and it's not, I think that there probably is a little, because it would be pretty irresponsible of Roman just to ignore the Judah problem and not do something about it, right? So I think that it's probably that middle ground somewhere in there that they put something out there and it just kind of went crazy.
Now, here's an interesting question. If the Romans did this in Judea, one would guess that they would use a similar strategy in different areas of the empire, because the empire had a lot of problems, like whether a lot of different rebellions. And from what I understand is the typical Roman strategy would be to incorporate the pre-existing gods into the Roman pantheon. Yeah. And that seems to be a different strategy than the idea about making making a Messiah altogether.
Yeah, and that's another one of the problems with this particular theory, because if the Romans invented Jesus, then they essentially took one of their biggest problems, which was local rebellion, which is something that Romans always struggled with, and they found the perfect way to solve the problem, and created the largest religion in the world with the stroke of a pen. But they didn't do that in Turkey or Egypt or
England,
Corsica,
or Gaul, or anywhere. They did it one time, just hit it out of the park. There were no screw-up attempts early on where they had to practice and fail at it, get it wrong and perfect it over time. They did it perfect, and then they said, man, that worked incredibly well. Let's never use that trick again. And then they just stopped. And then despite everyone, taking excellent records at the time, these Roman officials, they had excellent historians, and we have good records from these people. Yeah. At no point did any of them say, hey man, y'all got to give me credit. I did something amazing here.
Well, that was going to be my next point too. And I'm sure that we've all heard Professor Neil deGrasse Tyson say this, is that the larger the conspiracy, the more people involved in the conspiracy, the more likely it is to be revealed as a conspiracy.
Right. Yeah, and another.
Well, yeah, well, real quick, like the argument kind of to, because again, like probably still think it was just something that a bunch of Jews created to get power within themselves, but like an argument against like Rome never did it before. This would come at the end of the Roman Empire, right? It wouldn't be long before Christianity would fundamentally destroy Rome. So the argument could be that Rome was such the superpower then. It was completely different than what it had always been before. It's no longer the divine Caesar, but the bureaucratic the bureaucratic government. So I mean, that would kind of be the argument. Like maybe Rome was trying something new, and it led to the downfall of Rome. I guess.
I would challenge that idea just because of the fact, 70 AD, 80 AD, 90 AD, or CE, however you want to say it, Rome was in its prime.
Yeah, it was the superpower.
Yeah, it was the superpower. It was in terms of the state. It was in its prime. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a comment in the chat just now about how other religions, other areas of the Roman Empire might more readily accept, the classic Roman religion where you worshiped the emperor as a god, but the Jews, being monotheistic and completely opposed to that sort of thing, would not, and that would cause friction.
Yeah.
That's another problem with this hypothesis. The Romans actually granted the Jews an exception to that. For many years, during times of these conflict and stuff, the Jews did not have to make sacrifice and worship to Caesar. They were like, you'll get a pass, just pay your taxes and don't stab Romans in the street. And so they actually had, there was an exception to that rule in order to keep the peace. And so that couldn't have been used as a motivation because it actually didn't exist, because the Romans did allow them to sort of skip that step, of Roman life. The state religion. Okay, yeah, look, Caesar's the god, but you don't have to say so. Just pay your damn taxes. And so there were some emperors every now and then who were like, no, you must do it. And then there'd be all this conflict and stuff. And then the next person would come along and just be like, whatever, just stop fighting. And so, yeah, it would be very difficult to use that as a motivation because it was sort of an anomaly, not, it was an exception, not the rule.
And that's how it was in Jerusalem too at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I have studied a good bit of this history. You would have some pontiffs in Jerusalem that would be very lenient with the Jews, and then other pontiffs that wouldn't be. And so it kind of, and I believe at the time of Jesus, that particular pontiff was known to be very lenient with the Jews, and gave them a lot of leeway and pretty much, you practice your religion as long as you pay Caesar and you're not killing us. Go about your business.
Yeah. The idea of the widespread persecution that came around, that was also much later. So that would be sort of anachronistic. That's a product of a later time. And even when it was around, it wasn't as widespread or as intense as later Christians would make it out to be. In many cases, they were actually referring to the persecution on sectarian Christianity once Orthodox Christianity came into power in Rome. The Christian persecutions under the Roman Christians was the absolute worst. Once they were in power in the 5th century, they put their foot down on every other sect of Christianity. And the things they did were absolutely horrible. And some of those descriptions of the things that they were doing would end up in our history books, but concerning what Romans did, not what Christians did. And so, they literally took their own crimes and pretended that was the persecution that they suffered, instead of these are the horrors we visited upon other people. So that's another thing. The idea of the persecution and stuff, that kind of doesn't match up either.
Jason, I have to ask you, does the Book of Enoch help explain the passivity of the New Testament, the so-called passivity, where the Book of Enoch's kind of focus on the afterlife and final judgment?
In a way, yes. In some ways, there are certain parts of it that are still like, we're going to have to get all up in arms and we got to chop some bitches up. In other parts, though, there's this whole section. What is it? I think it's the 4th section of Enoch. So I can't remember the name. Right after the astronomy book, maybe the Dreams of Enoch or something. And it's around like chapter 100 to 106, somewhere around there. And it has this fantastic part where it's like, blessed are those who are peaceful. Blessed are those who are humble. Blessed are those who are meek and all this other stuff. It's actually a big section called the blessings and curses. And it's basically telling these sectarian Jews that life may suck on earth, but it'll be better, in the future in heaven, which is something that Torah observant Jews didn't have. They didn't have a real afterlife, or if they did, it wasn't divided. You didn't have the righteous and the wicked. It was everyone, went to this kind of dim place, Sheol, and that was it. But in Enoch, we do find this idea that the good people, they were basically going to suffer a lot on earth. And that's because they were doing the right thing. The wicked are concerned with the worldly, and the righteous are concerned with the heavenly. And so let the wicked have their time in the sun on earth, because after that they get to burn, and you get to do all these good things later. And there is a lot of stuff in there, because in that section, it doesn't talk about how necessarily a Messiah needs to come and do all this and kill all these people, but that these people will get their punishment by at the hands of angels who are going to come and do it. And so you don't even need to get your hands dirty. You just focus on being good, do the right thing. You'll get rewarded in heaven. And that message is definitely sold in the New Testament, as well as the idea that this can be given to the Gentiles. Because that's not Old Testament. That's Enoch.
And there's and the idea of the Book of Enoch then having to become Roman propaganda, or it doesn't have to be propaganda. It could be maybe appropriated by the Romans for propaganda.
It could, if there weren't also some other problems in there that talk about, in other passages, talk about people going on a rampage and wading through rivers of blood, and that would be a bit difficult. But if you were to take some of the message of Enoch and get rid of the stuff you didn't like, then you could get something a little more pro-Roman and less butchery, more pacifistic, and that would work. But again, there's a major problem. And this would also have to do with Joseph Atwill's idea that the New Testament came from Josephus. If you read the Gospel of Mark, and then you read the Gospel of Matthew, and then Luke, and then John, those are 4 different Gospels, 4 completely different messages, 4 different writing styles, 4 different stories. They're not one person. The message isn't even the same. They're different stories. It's different authors. And so this idea that one person could have written it, that's problematic. And then if you look at the epistles, of the 14 epistles, or was it 13? 13 epistles of Paul, only 7 of them were written by Paul. The rest are forgeries. And it can be determined just by looking at the writing style and the message. They are completely different. So Atwill's idea that Josephus wrote the New Testament, you'd have to pick one spot and say, okay, he wrote this, and then other people wrote the rest. He tries to fix the problem by engaging in the same sort of apologetic acrobatics that evangelicals try to practice, and by making these utterly nonsensical arguments that just, you can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Like the thing with the empty tomb, Mary Magdalene and Bob and Frank, they show up on Easter Sunday, they go in, and this is what they see. And then the next gospel, Mary Magdalene and Jim and, Amy, they show up and they see this, Well, instead of saying that these are different versions or whatever, he just says, oh, well, they just kept coming back. It was basically a revolving door. You just had people going in and out all day Sunday. I mean, were the Romans selling tickets to this event or something? And then you even have the people inside the tomb, the one man or two men or an angel or two angels. They were just changing places the whole time. So you'd have three different angels and three different men all trading places. One of
the gospels, it's not even like nobody's there, and it's just like this great rumbling above, and the ground's shaking, and it moves this stupid rock.
Right. It gets bad, and so the problem. Atwill's videos are fantastic. His videos on YouTube are very compelling. But when you actually read his book, it's simply untenable. There are arguments made that just do not hold water. He claims things that he'll make claims concerning numbers. There were in the Jewish wars, Josephus is writing about this one event, and there were like so many thousands of these things here, and then we have this thing in the Gospels, and it's supposed to be the same event, and it shows these same numbers at this same place, but when you actually look at it, the numbers are completely different. He's drastically changing the numbers. He's changing what the numbers are supposed to represent. He's changing the outcome. Oh, well, there were this many people who were captured and this many who were killed, and that represents this. And it's like, but the gospel doesn't say that. The gospel said that it was this many and they were all killed. Not, and the location has changed. It took place at this location in both places. Well, no, it doesn't. Because in the Gospels, it has this completely different location. And then he says that the location must have been changed. So he will literally change facts in order to fit his argument so that he can make connections that literally do not exist, and then use those connections to claim that the Jewish wars and the Gospels were written by one person. And it is simply dishonest what he does.
It sounds a lot like Holy Blood, Holy Grail. I don't know if you've ever read that old book, but it kind of sparked the conspiracy theory that was portrayed in the Da Vinci Code and all of that. And you read that book, and you read the Da Vinci Code even, and you do get sucked in. The Da Vinci Code is obviously a lot more fiction, to where Holy Blood, Holy Grail would be. It reads like you're reading history, and they're telling you, hey, this is the real history right here. Let me tell you how it lines up. Fascinating read. You get sucked into it, but actual deep research into it, and you're like, yeah, this doesn't quite line up the way that they're telling me it does.
Yeah. And so I
have to tell you, if I was writing a piece of propaganda about a Messiah, used to control the population of a given population, I would not write my team. Their role would be to kill that Messiah. Mm-hmm. I want to say that again because it's so absurd. I'm writing a piece of propaganda so that the people would be kind of managed and controlled by this messianic character. However, the twist is that my guys are the ones who kill him. That just doesn't seem that just seems absurd.
Yeah, there are a lot of problems with the hypothesis, which is why some of the people who present it, like Atwill, keep having to change facts. And anyone who wants to read Caesar's Messiah, what I would recommend is anytime he makes a claim about something that is found say, in the Gospels, like when it talks about the whole thing with the legion and the pigs, and he talks about the numbers. When he says something like that, stop right there, grab your Bible, flip it open to the relevant passage, which he does a pretty good job at quoting, like where it came from, Matthew 11, Mark 15, whatever. And he goes and he points out the passages that he's talking about. So when you find something like that, where he talks about a location, when he talks about a number, anything like that, grab your Bible, open it up, and read what it says in the Bible, and you will see what I'm talking about. He'll say a certain number, and he's like, oh yeah, the Gospels say this number, and Josephus also says this number about these two different events, and they're supposed to be linked. But then when you actually read the Gospel account, he's changed the number. The number is not, he's taking the number from the Jewish wars, and he's saying that the Gospels are using the same number, when in actuality, they aren't. He'll change places. Oh, well, it was supposed to be in this one place. I'm going to move it to this other place so it matches up with the writings of Josephus. And he does this throughout the book. And you could just fact check it. Anytime he quotes the Bible, open your Bible up and read the relevant passage and see if that is actually what it says, because many times it isn't. And if you have to change what it says to fit your argument, you don't have an argument. Okay. And that's just a fact. But there's another problem, and this is maybe the biggest problem. And it's tremendous. So all three of these people, Bruno Bauer, Joseph Atwill, and James Valiance, all present the argument that the Romans created Christianity to pacify the Messianic Jews. Okay, that would make sense to a point, because it's cheaper to write a document than to send out 6,000 soldiers. Okay, legions are expensive. So we come to a problem right there with the basic premise that has been going on since a decade after the Civil War. If you're trying to sell this to Messianic Jews, of course you would want it to be Messianic, pro-Roman, and pacifistic, which the New Testament is. But the New Testament is also a fourth thing that they don't take into account. The New Testament is completely dismissive of the Torah. You toss out all these old laws found in the books of Moses. You get rid of the kosher food laws and the purity laws and all these ritual laws and all of that. You get rid of all these
circumcision.
You get rid of circumcision, like the epistles of Paul, they're constantly arguing about circumcision. That goes, foreskin is a major topic in Christianity. And the New Testament kind of gets rid of all that. They're like, no, look, you don't need to be circumcised. You don't have to, have kosher food practices. You don't have to do these ritual cleanings and all of this. The Jewish exceptionalism isn't a thing. This is for everyone, not just the sons of Abraham, and so on and so on. The Messianic Jews that were a problem for the Romans were heavily Torah observant. Now, most of your purity laws were involved with ritual purity, and those were for the priests and the temple staff so they could perform these sacrifices. And the everyday person wasn't involved in this, okay? Mm-hmm. You didn't have to do all these things if you were just some guy who worked the fields, okay? Because it was for the priests, not for you. But when you look at some of these messianic sects that the Romans was having problems with, sometimes every person in the community was trying to live up to that expectation, not just the priests, okay? So if you are going to create something like the New Testament that is dismissive of these ideas, you can't sell that to Palestinian Messianic Jews. So just on the basic premise, it falls apart, because if you're saying you're creating it for your Messianic Jews who are the problem. You're trying to pacify them. It needs to appeal to them. And yet you are creating something that is uniquely unappealing to them. You are guaranteeing its failure. You are ignoring your target audience. You are actually excluding your target audience. And getting rid of the kosher food laws and stuff wouldn't help the Romans in any way, because it wasn't, food and foreskin that caused a problem for them. It was rebellion. And so all you needed it to be was messianic, pro-Roman, and pacifistic. The addition of these other things dooms it to failure, and none of their theories even address that problem in the slightest. And so if you're creating something to sell it to one group, you would market it toward that group. And instead, this is marketed everywhere but that group. And so the premise completely fails. The New Testament was not created for Messianic Palestinian Jews. It wasn't. Just read it.
Yeah, if anything, it was created for the more progressives to kind of split the difference, right? Like, because it goes totally against. Like, you're not going to get the Matt Powells of the world with the new Jesus that loves gay people, right?
Right. Yeah, you create a Jesus that loves gay people and say that it was created for evangelicals. No one's going to believe that was your intention.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
And it's like, just look at where Christianity succeeded. It didn't succeed in Palestine. It was an utter failure in Palestine. Palestinian Jews did not accept it. They did not adopt the New Testament. It succeeded everywhere else. It succeeded all over the Roman Empire with diaspora Jews and with Gentiles, the people that Rome did not have problems with. That is where Christianity succeeded. That is where it was adopted. That's where our Christianity came from, was everywhere but Palestine. Those people were hardcore, Torah-observant, Messianic Jews who believed the end of the world was coming within a decade or two. And you needed to do your part to throw off the yoke of Rome, kill a bunch of people in the streets, and earn your way up into heaven. And telling those people that they could do most of that, except for the Roman killing part, would be a good thing to do. But getting rid of the Torah law would guarantee that they would not adopt it. And so the premise, it falls flat. It excludes its target audience. And it's like a giant elephant in the room that's just knocking crap over, and they're ignoring it because of parallels, some real, some imagined. And they're saying, well, this must be it. I think a much better explanation is that you had people like Paul who were Roman Christians. Paul was, I think Paul was a Pharisee, but he was also a Roman citizen. And he knew that if the Messianic movement continued, it would lead to the annihilation of the Jews, which it did. And so he preaches to Jews in the diaspora that they don't need to be anti-Roman. And so this isn't a top-down approach from the Roman government. These are Jews who were fed up with getting killed. They're like, look, 80% of our history, we have lived under foreign rule. We can keep doing it and survive. Okay. Yes, you have Roman influence. That doesn't mean it was a deliberate, concerted effort by one particular man who hired a second man to write everything. That doesn't hold up.
What's fascinating about this is that they get fed up with, they figure out maybe over centuries that maybe making a nation state is a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Why not we just franchise the idea out? Why don't we just, it's kind of like Augustine in a way of saying, yeah, the Roman state's falling apart, but hey, there's the city of God that we're all members of. And we don't have to really put too much concern or investment into earthly affairs.
Yeah. And I'll say that it isn't impossible for the Romans to have engaged in religious propaganda to pacify the Jews. That is actually, like, it could be possible, especially with people like Vespasian and Titus, because they were familiar with Jewish practices. There were people in their family who were actual practicing Jews. They had relatives who, at later in life, became circumcised, which is just horrible to think about. And so, is it possible? Absolutely. They could have done something like this. But
I think it's probably probable
that group of Jews, because they were so Torah observant, you couldn't make something that was anti-Torah and expect them to go with it. What I think would be more likely is that the people like the Vespasian, and Titus, the Flavian dynasty, or other Romans, whether in power or not, were just engaging in basic syncretism. And then that rubbed off on the community for two reasons. One, it was appealing to mix, this religion with the religion of your rulers. And two, if you adopt this religion, then the Romans don't kill you. Because if you're not anti-Roman, you don't have much to worry about. But all the Messianic traditions that were anti-Roman, well, they all died. Like, the Romans killed them all. Most of them between 66 and 70 AD. And then there was a revolt some decades later. And after that, the Romans, they had no more troubles with the Jews, because all the ones that caused them trouble were dead.
Which was always the Roman way of dealing with issues. Rome was always a military state right from the very beginning. It was all about the military.
Yeah. So I think it's possible that there could have been, direct Roman involvement. It's just, we need some better evidence for it. And the arguments that it was done to pacify the Messianic Jews, it's not a good argument.
I think it's highly probable that Romans were doing religious propaganda, trying to stymie some of these problems that they later had to extinguish, and it's possible that it got out of hand. One of those tales of propaganda. But like you say, if you're going to make a claim like that, you need to have some really hard line evidence for it.
And you need to explain the problems as well. And you also have to look at the fact that lower classes like to emulate the upper classes. Christians loved using the Flavian imagery as sort of an identifying feature. Tombs of early Christians they were often marked with this symbol. It was an anchor with a dolphin going around it. And that was the symbol of the Flavian dynasty. And this was not a Christian symbol. It was Flavian, and it actually had pagan origins stretching back centuries. But they adopted this. And one part was that Titus was very popular with the people, and so they were like, "Oh, hey, we like this guy. This guy's cool." And so a lot of people adopted this. Now, could there have been a direct connection where he tried to bring his weird views to the masses? It's possible. We just need some better evidence for it. And I think the Roman origins of Christianity, I think that argument, it needs refinement. But if anyone wants to check it out, I would actually skip Joseph Atwill's book. Actually, I can post a link to it. There's a great rebuttal of it by a PhD in history. I can actually post that. And it goes through and it argues against some of the different points, but you can also just read his book. And anytime he makes a claim about something that the Gospels say or something that Josephus says in the Jewish Wars, you can actually just flip to either of those sources and see if that's actually what it says. And often It's not. He misrepresents the source material in order to claim connections that aren't there. But if you want a better version of this, there's a book called Creating Christ by James Valiance and C.W. Fahey. It is a much better argument for a Roman Jesus. I'm not convinced on it because of that fundamental problem with, your target audience. And there are a couple other little minor issues, but I think it's a much better argument. And if there is one that has potential, it would be that one.
Hey guys, thank you, man. That was a great show. We've got a few minutes left. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap everything up. Thank you, Jason, for carrying the load of the talking. We appreciate that. Every time you come on, we're like, I just let him go, man, because he's got so much knowledge spilling out. It's wonderful. Andy, do you want to tell us what's that?
I said that the coffee kicked in, so I can't shut up if that happens.
Understood. Andy, what do you got going on, man? You got any shows coming out today, or what's up?
Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Eastern, Jonathan M.S. Pierce is coming on my channel to talk about his book, The Nativity, A Critical Examination. Reading through his book right now. Jonathan M.S. Pierce has been on this channel. He's been on my channel a number of times. He's had some beef with William Lane Craig. And the last time I had him on at 7 a.m. in the morning, there were quite a few people who showed up. So, he's a Brit. Okay. It's time difference. So we're going to make it work tomorrow at 7 a.m.
Awesome sauce. Looking forward to it. You, Nokasuchi, what about you? You got anything going on?
Yeah, we have a Apostate Alliance at 1 p.m. today. We'll be talking with the former Muslim about their deconversion story, and then tomorrow we'll be wrapping up the Matt Powell thing. So if you were a guest on that series and would like to wrap it up with us, that'll be tomorrow at noon.
Wonderful. What about you, Jason? Do you have anything going on you want to tell us about? Shows coming out?
So I'm working on the next episode of the podcast, which hopefully I can get my head back in the game with it. Can't concentrate lately, but working on that. It's going to go into Paul's letter to the Corinthians, which his 2 letters to the Corinthians are actually made up of about 4 or 5 different letters that are all chopped apart, mixed up, and jumbled together, which is why it's so hard to cover it, because you have to constantly jump all over the place. So I'm trying to untangle all of that and then put it into, some kind of cohesive order. So that's going to be dropping hopefully in the next couple of days. And then the rest of the time between now and the new year, when I'm not working on the podcast, I'm hopefully going to be away from society, out in the woods, hanging out with bears and mountains and stuff like that, because I'm not a fan of Christmas time. I don't like people, but I like the outdoors. So I'm going to go get lost out in the woods as soon as I'm done with the podcast.
Awesome. That's awesome. That sounds like fun right there, I tell you. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. We're going to do a live stream Wednesday. That's going to be the 1-year anniversary of the Daily Atheist Morning Show. I don't know what's going to happen. I may invite some folk and they may show up on the show as we do that. After that, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't know. Don't know if I haven't decided yet. We may not stream again until the first of the year for, I'm taking a little break for me. So I'm not sure, really. We'll see. But I'll let you know about that stuff as I figure it out as we go along. So thank you all for being wonderful. Thank you to my co-host. Thank you to my guests. You're so wonderful. I'm going to run this Christmas in Hell commercial. I hope you all enjoy it. Have a great day, and we will see you Wednesday.
Hello all, Chris Mallard here, atheist extraordinaire, host of the Daily Atheist Morning Show, and currently burning in hell. Oh, don't worry about me. I'm not dead. I'm just down here for the annual Christmas party. I mean, annual Solstice Awards party. The Dark One, or Lucy as he is affectionately known, is personally handing out the awards. Aaron Ra is getting the award for the most souls brought down by evolution for his African fossil hunt, and Matt Dillahunty has won the Golden Phallus Award for being a dick to the most Christians. Oh wait. It's the Golden Fallacy Award for the confusing the most Christians. Easy mistake to make. To top it off, Seth Andrews has lent his voice to the Gregorian chants this year. It's delightfully hellish. Gotta run. I hope you all had a happy Thanksgiving, if you're into that sort of thing, and I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. A happy holidays, happy solstice, and a happy new year. Stay safe, heathens. Party hard, fornicate, that sort of thing. But do it safely.
Thank you for watching the show. A special shout out to my gold level Patreon supporters, Cindy Plaza and Ian Davenport. Thank you and have a great day.